script.
Yeah. Let's hear a hand for Nancy Allen. We have a tradition at this festival. You've been here the past few nights, and so maybe you know that we give a golden thumb to our filmmakers, and we're very proud to present this one to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. It's a great honor. Thank you very, very much. It means a lot to me.
And tonight we're going to have a special treat just for you. We've asked Leonard Maltin to come and do the Q&A with you. So, Leonard, can you come out, please?
Hi, everybody. Well, hi.
Hello.
It is a little spooky seeing you, on screen and living with you in that character, and then here you are.
Alive.
Yes, alive and well. And last year, I started the project of scanning old snapshots into my computer, and I start to understand now how actors feel when confronted with, themselves on screen 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's like, oh, okay, I get it now. It is a little odd,
Yeah.
but it's there forever, isn't it?
Yeah.
And,
it is.
and films like this and some of the others that you've made just have endless lives.
Yeah, it's really, it's very exciting actually to see that and to see this is it'll be 25 years this July that this film opened, and we're still talking about it. People are still looking at it. It's really wonderful.
I know, and at the same time, every film is a period piece in its own way because it's a mirror of when it was made. This film, which we watched on 35 millimeter film, is like a celebration of analog technology. So it's appropriate we watched it on film because it's all about tape recorders, payphone booths, Nagra tape recorders, which is what every filmmaker used, 16 millimeter film, having to go to a laboratory to get it developed.
Yeah.
All of these things that have vanished from our world, some of them completely.
Yeah, well, also Jack cutting up the magazine and putting the film together.
Sure, making a flip book,
now
yeah.
with computers and scanning things.
Sure, I know.
Amazing.
It's amazing. And yet all that was absolutely the way everything was done, and it was normal, and nobody foresaw, I don't think anybody really foresaw the complete change that we've undergone. And I guess someday, if not already, there may be some graduate student here who's already done it, but someday somebody's going to do a history of contemporary film and have to divide it into the pre-cell phone era and the post-cell phone era, because this is a pre-cell phone movie. And if you think about so many films where the entire plot line would be different if there were only a cell phone, even a pager. But certainly if there was a cell phone, everything would be different. And yet, I wouldn't trade a minute of this film because it's authentic to the time. And it's authentic to everything we saw there. Do you know why Brian decided to set it in Philadelphia? Was there a specific reason?
Well, Brian was born and raised in Philadelphia, and
Thank
I
you.
think he always
Okay.
wanted to shoot a movie there.
Mm-hmm.
And so he created the Liberty Bell theme
Mm-hmm.
with this so he could go shoot it there. It's a beautiful
It's great use
landscape.
of the city, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it really is. And we had shot the interior of the museum sequence in Dress to Kill there. So I think as we walked around the city, I think it just sparked him again that it would be a great place to shoot.
Interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. Of course, this is one of a handful of films you made with Brian De Palma, the first one being Carrie, another film that has endured for good reasons. And that was the first time you got to work with John Travolta, as you mentioned in your introduction. Tell us about working with him. He's so good in this movie. The two of you work together very well.
We do. We first met at the screen test for Carrie, and I had rehearsed with another actor because there were two actors that were screen tested for each of the main roles. So I first tested with Michael, the actor that I'd rehearsed with, and I thought it was great. And then John walked in, and the minute I looked at him, I thought, well, he's getting the part, that's for sure. And I didn't know who had rehearsed with him, but so we had never met. We sat down, we played the scene, and it was just like so much chemistry between us, and we had so much fun. So when this opportunity came up, and John was not even on the list of actors to play this role because it was a really small film initially, small piece, and the actors, the role Sally and Jack were actually, Kate or Liz or one of those names that Brian liked to use, and this actor, and they were written for older actors, maybe someone like more cerebral kind of actors, Jimmy Woods, Richard Dreyfuss, these kind of parts, and John called Brian one day and said, "Oh, hi, what's going on? What are you working on?" And Brian said, "Oh, I'm working on this piece," and John asked to read it. So I said to Brian, "Well, what are you going to do if he likes it? He's not even on the list." So that's exactly what happened. He loved it and wanted to do it, and I said, "Wow, that's going to change everything." And Brian said, "Yeah, it is," and he would like to do.
In the sense that he was such a big star that it upped the stakes.
Well, but also, John was he's all heart, he's all heart and soul, and he was much younger than the character that was written, and so then Brian said, well, he'd like to do it with you, he'd like to work with you again, and I was never going to make this movie, and I thought, well, let me think about it. Okay, I'll do it. So we had to then go to work, roll up our sleeves, go to work, do some improvs, and tailor the roles to John and I. So we had a great time.
How did he tailor it for you?
Well, through improvisation, we started to, try to figure out how these characters would be if they were younger. And one of the things that I like is that I like characters that I'm playing to have just a little hope, a dream hope. And these characters were hopeless. I mean, they were just, it was past them. So we played around a little bit, and I thought, well, okay, we know she does makeup. What if she has this fantasy about doing makeup for movies? We know, as the guys, we know she's never going to do it, but she has this dream. I think people have to have some hope in their life. So that's one of the things, and that was probably one of the key things.
Did you have any role models in mind as you were fashioning this character, her voice, her mannerisms?
Well, I had always liked, we looked at Judy Holliday and Born Yesterday, but I think in terms of who she was, I always liked Julieta Messina in La Strada. She was just such a, sort of kind of sweet, dumb girl. And, but there was something in her. There was a piece of her that knew. She just covered it up. And I thought about the voice, which the producer just about had a meltdown when he said, "Oh my God, are you going to do that voice through the whole picture?" But there's something that I noticed about women who, when they don't really want to grow up, and their voice gets stuck somewhere in their throat, and it's that childlike. They don't want to let go of it. They don't really want to take responsibility. So that's what I thought about her, and then I saw her as a little rag doll, like just a little rag doll was the visual. So. People either loved it or hated it.
And you got to work with Ann Roth on the costumes, one of the great costume designers.
Just really an extraordinary designer, and she's still doing it.
Still going strong,
We
yes.
had worked together, it's the first time we worked together on Dress to Kill. And she's, as as an actress, you prepare and you do all your work, but the wardrobe, everything, wardrobe, hair, makeup, all of that helps. And somehow she thought about, we talked a lot about the character, and I don't know if anyone noticed, I was wearing a little rabbit's foot on a ribbon around my neck. And that, you saw it once, most of the time, but I wore it all the time under my costume, under my dress or whatever I was wearing, because she said that's something that we decided she'd be a little superstitious, and that if she had this, everything would be okay with her.
Wow.
Yeah, little touches like that.
Well, but they add up to something, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
They really do.
Tell us a little about that, because I never appreciated this until recent years when I heard some pretty significant actors and actresses talk about how much the costumes, the wardrobe, whatever you want to call it, if it's a contemporary film, how much it helps you shape your character and how much it reflects the character that you're trying to create.
Yeah, it really does. And, even the boots, the high-heel boots, Anne had worked with hookers on, we'd worked on that a little bit in Dress to Kill, and this was sort of a carryover from that. But, you put on the boots, and you've got the tights on, and the hat, all of those pieces really, the right jewelry, I think probably the best example I could give was just the dress in Dress to Kill, the purple dress. And you'd put this dress on, it was a silky dress, and you'd put it on, you feel so sexy in it. And like Sally, when I put on the boots, because I always had boots, high-heel boots, it just gives you a slightly different feeling,
It changes your posture.
It changes your posture for sure, but it just gives you a different feeling about yourself. It's really almost indescribable. You know if something doesn't work, but when it all comes together, and then you look in the mirror, you go, oh, there she is. There's that girl.
How interesting.
Yeah.
It's a transformation, isn't it?
It is.
What about some of the things I want to ask you? Now, working with your husband, you worked with Brian first on Carrie, and then several years later, the two of you got married, and you continued working together. And that's not typical. It has happened before. Many directors and actors, have worked together as husband and wife. But I'm wondering, without being intrusive or asking anything inappropriate, but I'm wondering what it was like for you. Did he live with these movies at home 24 hours a day? And did that mean you also lived with them 24 hours a day?
Well, everybody wants to know that. And, really, when we were shooting a film, we didn't talk about it at all when we left the set. When he was writing, he was in it. He was sort of writing and in it, and he'd read to me what he'd written and this kind of thing. But, and we talk about the development of things, but when we were shooting, never really. Because once he prepared, once he storyboarded the picture, the rest was pretty much a nuisance for him. It was a necessary thing. He had to shoot. He really enjoyed shooting. So the last thing he wanted to talk about was shooting or doing what we were doing after we finished work that day.
How interesting, because that's so much what one of his heroes, Mr. Hitchcock, always said.
Oh.
That the shooting was kind of a nuisance, an inconvenience. The planning,
Yeah.
the editing, those parts he loved, but the actual production, not his favorite part.
The big set piece with the parade and the mummers and the cars, and it was just so spectacular. And I remember we went out there that day, and I looked around and looked at all of this, and I was so excited for him. And and I said to him, "Isn't this incredible? All these people are here to, realize your vision." And he said, "Yeah." And, it was always about we're waiting and waiting and waiting. Everything took too long. He wanted to move faster. So it was a little, I wished he'd enjoyed it more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, when you're on a location, anything can happen. You're outdoors. You can't really control as much as you'd like to control as you can on a set, or theoretically as you can on a set.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy being on location? Did that, you think, enhance the film for you as an actress?
Oh, absolutely. I love shooting in practical locations. When you're on a sound stage, I mean, it's great. You have a set and everything is very controlled, as you say, but it almost sucks the life out of you. I mean, it really takes a tremendous amount of effort to breathe life back into everything. So when you're outside and you have all the elements and sounds and textures and all of that, it really, it just really helps. Now, of course, you're always waiting. There's a car horn. The weather's changed or whatever it is. It brings problems, but all in all, I think it's much more exciting. Yeah.
Well, if you don't get energized by that, you're dead.
Definitely.
Yeah. I keep thinking about that train station in Philadelphia because I've spent time there, and it's one of the creepiest places I've ever been. Without a good director directing it or lighting it or shooting it in a certain way, I just find that a creepy place. So that's what's going through my mind right now. It's distracting me terribly.
Well, it was very creepy for me under the circumstances.
Did Brian write all these roles with you specifically? You just told us it was not the case
Yeah.
for this film. What about Dress to Kill?
Dress to Kill was written for me, although I didn't know it at the time. We were relatively newly married, and he started working on this particular piece. And he'd get up very early in the morning to write, and I'd come down and make coffee, and he'd read me the new installment every day. And then I left. I was shooting 1941 at the time. I went back to location, back to California, and he read me the final installment over the phone, and I said, God, this is so good. I can see the whole movie, and the script really never changed, not barely. And he said, well, I'm really glad you like it because I wrote this role for you. So it was
Wow.
really, it was a nice surprise.
Wow.
And then I thought, I was so excited, and I went, oh my God, this is really scary. Big responsibility.
Well, yes, and that film is, such an incredible thriller.
Yeah.
And must have been so demanding of you as an actress to do it for anybody, let alone your husband.
Yeah. Yes, it was complicated, for sure.
And then Home Movies was really a school project, wasn't it? He was teaching at the time.
Yeah, actually, that grew out of a conversation that Brian was having with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, and they were just, sitting around having dinner and talking about, where are all the young filmmakers? Where are all the guerrilla filmmaking? And, and he said, they talked about, I should teach a class in how to make a low-budget film. Why are they, so that's how it began, and he had done some graduate work at Sarah Lawrence, so there were mostly Sarah Lawrence students, a couple people from NYU, 2 students flew in from out of town, had heard about it. So we shot most of it on the Sarah Lawrence campus, and it was really a fun project and a very personal film. It was very autobiographical. People don't realize that, but it was really loosely based on Brian's family.
Huh.
So it was a fun project.
And he talked Kirk Douglas into getting involved.
Well, he didn't talk him into it, actually. They'd just done The Fury, and he gave the script to Kirk. He says, how about playing the father? And he said, no, I want to be the professor of star therapy. He was thinking of George Memoli for that role originally, which would have been very different.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. A lot of directors say, and continue to say, and with good reason, that a big part of their job, maybe the biggest part of their job, is casting, and casting the role properly. So I want to ask you about some of the other directors you've worked with and whether you feel you were directed a lot or a little. For instance, you worked with Steven Spielberg in 1941, and with a terrific cast, a great ensemble, and we all know what a talent he is. Did he direct you much?
He'd give you just a little note from time to time, and we had, I'll give you one example, when we're in the plane and in the beginning, and Tim and I are there, and we're about to square off with each other when he's trying to take my clothes off and trying to kiss me in the plane. And so we rehearsed it, and Steven said, he told me, well, I don't want you to do that. I want you to do something else, whatever it was. And I said, well, don't know, I don't really see it that way. He says, I'll tell you what, let's shoot it both ways, and then we'll look at it. So we did. We shot it both ways, and he said, you know what, I think I like what you did. So he was a collaborator. He wouldn't lock you into doing anything specifically, although we were using a camera called a Lumicrane, which had never been used. It's a camera on a long arm, and it was all digital, not digital, but it was computerized. So when he was giving Tim very specific directions about, opener, do this, now do that. And so we're shooting, and he's over a bullhorn, and the camera's in like a little spy looking at us, and he started directing Tim, okay, so lean down, now kiss her. Oh, no, not like that. That's really stupid. Don't do that. It became a little bit much, but almost like a choreographer. But when you're shooting with a camera like that, you almost had to do it because you didn't really have any.
There's no operator there.
There is no, there isn't. But mostly I would say, what's great about all really good directors is they're never locked into do anything one specific way. They have a specific vision, but they want to really see what the actor can bring to the role. They're good collaborators.
Well, you worked then with Robert Zemeckis on I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah.
And that was his directing debut, well, his feature directing debut.
Yeah.
He made short films at USC.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a script that he wrote with Bob Gale, his longtime partner. And those early films of theirs, like that and Used Cars and the others that they did, have such a manic energy. I mean, they're explosive.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to describe them. So I'm wondering what did he do to goose you guys to reach that point of energy every time the camera had to turn?
Well, certainly that was Bob's energy on the set, but I think with this particular group, with Wendy Jo Sperber and Teresa Saldana and Bobby DeCicco, we were all, and Eddie Deason, Eddie, we were all really hyped up. I mean, we were really excited to be making this movie. So that was the energy all the time.
If you don't know, if you haven't seen I Want to Hold Your Hand, it's about Beatlemania at its core.
Yeah.
And it's about the Beatles' trip to New York to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show, and some absolutely rabid fans, young fans, were determined to meet them. And that was you guys.
Yeah, we had a blast. Actually, it was originally supposed to be shot in New York, but the studio said, no, too much money, we can't go there. I think they did a great job building that set on the back lot, though. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it looks terrific.
Mm-hmm.
It looks almost real.
Yeah, it does.
So that energy was authentic.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were totally hyped up.
The other film I want to ask you about is one I just watched again recently, and I was so pleased that it's just as good, it seems to me, as the day it came out. That's Robocop.
Oh, thank you.
And now you were in several Robocops, but I'm talking about the first one, directed by Paul Verhoeven, and it is such a subversive movie. I mean, it's still subversive today, which I think what was missing from the remake. The remake was kind of okay, but that first film is just off the charts.
Well, it's a great script. Mm-hmm. You know, it's one of few scripts that I picked up and that was sent to me, and first thing I did was call my agent. I said, they're going to change the title, right? This is really not going to work. And I thought, well, I'll read a little bit of it. It's probably stupid. And I picked it up, and I couldn't put it down. I'd never read anything like it. It was smart. It was funny. It had so many new ideas in there, and a big heart and soul to it, too. So I do think that it worked. We shot the movie for very little. The budget was like $11 million or $13 million. And that energy, you want to talk about energy on a film set. Paul Verhoeven would literally walk on a set. Why are we not shooting? Anything that we were waiting for. If we had to be mic'd for anything with the little wireless mics, he'd go crazy, because this was holding everything up. He thought it was a big conspiracy. But the film, he really brought the energy to the film, and I think the depth, because it could have, on paper, it was just fun. It was just like this great, fabulous, funny cartoon. But being Dutch, and if you're familiar with any of his films, he brought really the soul to the picture, and
Mhm.
that's why it's still highly watchable.
Yes, it is.
You know?
And it's a great part for you,
Mhm.
and different from almost anything else you've done.
Oh yes, I wanted that part so badly, and when I read that script, my father was a New York City cop, and I said, I know this role, I know this character, but I had to fight for the role. I really did.
It was worth fighting for.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do you, now, of all the films you've made, and we're talking about films that were, in many cases, spectacularly successful, in some cases modestly successful, but they all made their way into the sort of consciousness of the audience. What do people talk to you about most?
I would say the three films that are discussed the most are Carrie, Blowout, and Robocop. Those three, yeah.
Well, it's a great trifecta.
Yes.
Did you know if I'm trying to phrase this right, because Blowout, which is a great title and a grabber of a title, is of course in its own way an homage to Antonioni's Blow Up.
Yes.
And in Blow Up, it's a photograph that holds the mystery, and here it's mostly sound recording.
Yes.
Photos too, but mostly a sound recording that holds the mystery. Was Brian ever reluctant to admit that, or was that an open secret? Do you know?
No, I think that he was, yeah. I mean, it was a film and an idea that he liked. I mean, you can see Blow Up in here. You can see the conversation. You can see the Kennedy assassination, Chappaquiddick, and a lot of the things that he was fascinated by. And it was originally called, as I was mentioning to you earlier, it was originally called Special Effects. And someone from the studio said, well, you know, they're going to compare it to Blow Up. And he said, well, then let's just call it Blow Out and just put it right out there. So I think he was cool with it.
That was a smart move.
Yeah.
Why not put it on the table?
Yeah.
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 Very, very good. All right, I don't want to hog this conversation. I want to give you folks a chance to ask Nancy whatever you would like. And we have some folks with microphones out there. And we don't want you to holler. We want you to speak into the mics. And here's one of them. And there's one back there. And there's one on the balcony, too. So if our...
I got one up front here.
Okay. Where are we looking? Which direction?
Here?
There we are.
Yeah, I've heard that like you had to reshoot several sequences because the footage got stolen, and I kind of wonder because it goes from day to night rather abruptly, and I always wondered about that because.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. In fact, it was the big set piece, the big set piece with all of the driving and the car crashing and the horses and the car going up. I mean, all of that footage. The film canisters were picked up and they were being transported to Technicolor in California. And this was on a Friday at the end of day, and Brian had left the editing, and they were looking, and the canisters were gone. And it was awful. He was running up and down with his editor they were going through, trash cans and Broadway and everyone thought that it was, fixed because he wanted to reshoot the sequence. It wasn't true at all because he was devastated and didn't know if we'd even get the money to reshoot it. So we had to go back. In fact, Vilmos Zsigmond, who was the most extraordinary cinematographer, and we lost him this year, unfortunately, but he wasn't available. So we had to go back, and his friend, who's also a great cinematographer, went back, and they had to stage all of that with the extras, with the car crash, with the helicopters and all of it. It was a really, really big deal. So the day to night thing I'm not sure about, but I do know that that's what happened. It would cost a lot of money. It was very expensive.
And it was his fellow Czech refugee, Laszlo Kovacs.
That's
who
the
did-
name
who
I
did
couldn't
the-
think
yeah.
of. Thank you.
I have a
something?
question here to your right.
Uh-huh.
That was a good segue because my question was about Vilmos and if you had any stories to share. I mean, the film is one of my favorites. It looks so beautiful, and he was such an artist. So if you had any stories about him.
Yeah, that's a great question. That was really one of the greatest experiences of my career. He was a magnificent cinematographer and a really great person. He had such a beautiful eye, and I mean, you look at how he shot and how he lit the bridge and the whole Wissahickon Creek sequence. Looks like a painting. I never thought about lighting when I worked with him because I knew it would be perfect. And I remember we were shooting the sequence with John and I in my apartment where it's the big exposition scene where he's talking to me and trying to get me to go along and help him. And we were shooting for about, because there were a lot of setups, we were shooting for about, maybe about an hour. And Vilmos went up to Brian, he says, I'd like to relight this. I was like, now? You want to really go? He said, yeah, it's not working. It doesn't work. And so we did. And he was right, because if you saw the footage before and then after, and I got to see him last year. In fact, John Travolta and myself and Paul Hirsch, who edited the film, I was contacted by a French filmmaker who was doing a documentary about Vilmos, and it's actually premiering, I think, in France in May. So we all got together, and I'll just tell you this little story because I love it. It's very personal to me. The set photographer that we had, Louis Goldman, was also an extraordinary photographer, and he shot on 1941, and he did a beautiful book of all of his films that he'd shot, and there's a photograph of Vilmos, Mike Gershman, who was his second AC, and me, where Vilmos is literally holding me so I could be that close to the camera as John was walking around. And I brought the book to show Vilmos and say, this is my favorite picture that's ever been taken on a set. And he had the picture and to tell me that it was his favorite picture too. So it's kind of a very sweet memory. And he was a true artist and a great gentleman, really.
Thanks for sharing that with us.
Question from the balcony in the center.
Hello there.
Hello. I have a question about a scene early in the film where you and John Travolta are talking in the bar in the train station. And during that conversation, he whispers in your ear, and I'm not sure if you would mind sharing maybe what he said to you, or maybe you can remember.
Everybody asks that question. And so far I've never told, and I probably won't tell you. What I will tell you, it'll spoil it. You don't want to know what he said. But, you know, John, it was great about John. And he also, in that scene, if you notice, when I say to him, oh, that's a great job. How'd you get that job? And he said to me, that's a good question. I don't know. Well, he wasn't supposed to say that. So John was one of those actors that you never really knew what he was going to do, which kept it very interesting. You really had to pay attention. So at the end of that sequence, when he leans over and he whispers in my ear, which was not at all scripted, he whispered something that was very personal to me. And it's nothing, you know, nothing sexual, nothing like that. It was just, I'll just say it had to do with food. I will give you that clue, and that's all I'll tell you.
Okay. The mystery continues. The mystery endures. I like that. That's good. We shouldn't know everything. Where's our next question? Right
Question
there?
center here.
Okay.
Hi, thank you both for being here. Nancy, I didn't get to meet you. I was on set for Robocop in Dallas, and I didn't get to meet. I was shadowing the special effects on. They were blowing up gas stations and things, and fortunately you weren't at those. But I did want to say that I know that you've co-starred with Wendy Jo Sperber, and there's something you've got going on that some work that you're doing now with Wendy Jo, and I was kind of curious about what you were doing with that.
Oh, okay,
That's
thank
a great
you.
entree to talk about a very, very worthwhile charity.
Well, Wendy Jo Sperber and I met, and I want to hold her hand, and we were kindred spirits and just great friends. And then we went on to do 1941 and had a blast. And then she went off to do television. She did Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks. Really, really a great comedic actress. And in 1997, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she had 2 young children, 7 and 10 at the time. And what she recognized was that it didn't just affect her, but it affected everyone in her family, her friends. Everybody was melting down. So what she wanted to do, and she lived in Sherman Oaks in California, and there was no place no place that she could go to for support. She had to drive a great distance to get any support. There was actually no place in Los Angeles that offered any kind of support for children outside of a psychiatrist's office or therapist's office. So she, Wendy being Wendy, said, well, you know, I'm going to just create a place. And everybody said, no, well, you can't do that. You don't know anything about that. And she said, well, I'm going to do it. So she called me and said, I need you. You play a little golf. I said, I play a little golf. And she organized a celebrity golf tournament and raised a lot of money, and then opened a center in Sherman Oaks. And she called me. She said, I found a place. You got to come right over. And I ran over there, and she was standing in the middle of this place. It was a storefront. It was so run down and inside, and she's standing around and looking around, and she said to me, isn't it beautiful? And I thought, what is she talking about? This place is a mess. But, you know, of course, she was seeing everything that she wanted to create there, so she invited me to help her and asked me if I wanted to be involved in fundraising. I said, absolutely not. And she said, well, what about the programs? You know, you're into all that woo-woo stuff. Can you help me? And I said, sure, you know, I'll help you a little bit. And this was 15 years ago, and it was Wendy and myself and her cousin, who was a licensed clinical social worker, and her sister, who had a master's in psychology, and we opened the center. And I started she said, well, you can be the creative program director. And I said, okay. And all we had was the best of intentions and a lot of excitement for what we wanted to do. And by the end of the first year, we were so excited because we had one program every single day. And today, 15 years later, we have 70 programs a week. We have 40 facilitators and instructors, and serve between 1,500 to 2,000 people a year. And all the services are free. Everything is free. Support groups for families, for cancer patients, for children, for teens, bereavement, and a wide variety of integrative and complementary services that help with anxiety and side effects for cancer. And it's really a beautiful place. We did lose Wendy in 2005, unfortunately, but it goes on, and it's really an extraordinary place. I feel, you know, people have asked me, isn't it depressing? And it isn't. It never is in there. It's a joyful place. People want to live, and we do a lot of creative things because we feel it's good for the spirit. And I'm really proud and kind of mystified at how it all happened, but I thank her for that because it really changed my life in a great way. And of course, she's still changing everybody's life by being there. You've been to some of our fundraisers.
Yes, I have. And the spirit is great, and it is absolutely infectious. So if people want to learn more, they will go online to
www.wespark.org.
WESPARK, wespark.org.
And actually now, if you Google me, you can figure it out. You can find it too.
Very good. All right, do we have some more questions? We have a little more time, I think.
We have one right in the center here,
Okay.
right in front of you.
I really enjoy your acting, and Carrie was the very first movie I've ever seen of yours. What actually drew you to Carrie and to the projects that you have chosen, and also whatever your most recent project is going to be, plus that foundation?
What was the first part of your question?
What drew you to the part in Carrie?
Oh my God, she was fabulous, wasn't she? I love that role in Carrie. I read that script, and I tell you what, I just wanted to play her. The idea of playing a character like her, I thought she was funny, and I also thought that she was. It was a place that I could be bad with no consequences, you know. So yeah, I love that role. I was the last person of the last day to read for that film. Yeah.
How many people have they seen? Do you know?
Well, I know we've been casting for about 3 months, and there were all these great stories about Brian and George Lucas casting together for Star Wars and Carrie, but I got in under the wire at the very, very end. So I was
Then
lucky.
it was meant to be.
It was meant to be. Yes.
We have something up there at the balcony?
Yes, from the balcony,
Yes.
right here.
Hi, I'm wondering about the scream. And at what point did you have to scream for your husband as a in the condition of being cast?
Well, the scream was shot on the set when we did the end of the film where the flag is behind me and I reach out and I scream. That was actually done on the sound stage because we needed a controlled environment to do that. So we shot the sequence and then I just screamed a whole bunch of times and they recorded it. In fact, some of those really horrible screams, I got to do those too. That was really fun.
Which shows your versatility.
Yeah.
Good way to show off your chops as an actress. Anybody else here on the ground floor that we're missing?
Question here in the center.
Yes.
Hi, Nancy. I love the film and when it came out and again tonight. What struck me about a 25-year-old film is long scenes with continuous dialogue. Can you talk about learning all that dialogue and has that changed today? Like, I'm thinking of the scene with Dennis Franz in the apartment. Can you talk about working with him?
Oh my God, Dennis Franz. You know, that was the second time we worked together. We worked together in Dress to Kill. And I mean, it was love at first sight for me with him as an actor because he's just one of those actors that's really solid and can follow you anywhere you go in terms of what you're doing with the material. And he's just, you know, we had a really good time working together. So I was excited that he was going to play Manny Karp, which I think is such a fabulous name. And actually the scene, it's two scenes, cut up into two scenes. It was actually one long scene. And after viewing it a few times, Brian decided to cut it up so that you would have Dennis and I just sort of split up in the film. He's just a wonderful, wonderful actor. I loved working with him.
He was also asking about the process of shooting a long
the long scene,
dialogue take without a lot of cutting.
Well, it's fabulous, you know, it's fabulous. In fact, what's great too is, you know, we rehearsed, when we rehearsed this film, we rehearsed it, you know, scenes, but when we were shooting before we started shooting, Brian had the whole cast brought down to Philadelphia, and we rehearsed it like a play. So one scene, and then the next scene, and the next scene, so that he could see it see the whole script in front of him through the actors. And for us, it was great because we got to develop and see how the character, what was working, what wasn't working with the character, which pretty much it was. But I don't know, you just learned your lines. That's what you did, you know? That's what you did, and it's so much better than, although I have to say, I don't mind. Sometimes I like, because film is so visual, I do like shooting sequences where there isn't dialogue too. That can be fun. But in this, we tried to keep it, especially the scene with John and I, a couple of scenes, we tried to keep things moving along pretty quickly. I would imagine now it'd be more difficult. People are very impatient. I thought the audience was really well behaved watching this movie tonight.
Oh, this is a primo audience here.
Yeah, clearly. Movie lovers.
These are not schleppers. This is Ebertfest. Was there another question over here? Up there.
From the balcony to your right.
Okay, over there.
Hi there. One of the things that I love about this movie, and I think it's a common thread in both the De Palma movies and Hitchcock movies, is how it blends kind of like high and low culture. There's sort of exploitative elements that are both celebrated and kind of sent up, I think. And so I found it interesting, especially with your character, how there's the vulnerability, being the victim, but also having agency. Can you talk about how you humanize someone who's also kind of in this tradition of women as victims in movies?
Oh, boy. So we're talking about women's this particular role. What was the name of this role?
She's saying that this film does what a lot of sort of postmodern films do, in that you are a victim, you are sort of a classic damsel in distress on one hand, but at the same time you're not the cliche. You sort of dodge and slip away from that in your own way and in the way the character's written.
Well, yeah, it's that, but it's also, if you look at the character in Dress to Kill 2, she could be perceived as a victim, but she was a very active character and had a forward path and took her life into her own hands. And in a sense, Sally does make a turn. She makes a choice. She could leave. She could have easily left. But there's something in this character that wants to stay and wants to stand up for herself. That's for me, a really important thing. I like characters like that. It's really tough. You know, women have been so traditionally victims in film, but we do, I don't know, I think we do our best as actresses to make those characters a little more palatable to women today. I watched it tonight. It was interesting watching it tonight because I did see, I mean, you do look at her and you think, okay, she's a dumb bunny. Maybe she deserves what's happening to her. But when she does make that turn and she does make that choice, you kind of root for her a little bit, I think. Yeah?
Do you guys think so? That was a leading opportunity. I just sort of took it. Anyone else? Because otherwise, I think we're going to say thank you to Nancy Allen for being here and for accompanying this film 25 years after the fact.
Thank you, Leonard. Thank you so
Nancy.
much.
Nancy Allen. And Blowout.